Hello friends, it is I, Rob, once more here in my basement lair with, a cup of coffee and an urge to talk about something. So, you're welcome to Coffee with Rob. This is, for those of you who don't know me, my opportunity as a YouTube creator to talk directly without the intercourse of the various characters that I play on YouTube. My primary one, OmnusI, is my fundamental game master role, where I pontificate about all sorts of things related to gaming using my 40 years of gaming experience and most of that running games. But of course, if you've never seen my channel at Lair of OmnusI, I do a number of things, many of them attempting to be entertaining. My Ask the Wizard series, for example, where you can talk and ask questions to an actual fantasy wizard in a fantasy setting. I have a variety of characters like Dirk Casterly, Last Bard Standing. So, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. But this is a video response because I just got done watching a video for a channel that I subscribe to called Puffin Forest, which I will link in the description below, which is animated and narrated by the creator, Ben, who puts in a lot of good experiences from his own role-playing games and insights that he has, and he's a clever guy, and his animation style is nice. He's got more talent in his fingers than I do by a long shot, and it's very entertaining. Highly recommend. If you haven't seen his stuff before, go check him out, subscribe. He's got great stuff, and he puts out content fairly frequently. He also collaborates with other DMs. It's good stuff. It can really be a good web to find other people if you are interested in the role-playing hobby. These are the kind of people that are good to know. So he put out a video talking about the differences between role-playing games and movies. And, I thought that was an interesting topic because lately there's been a lot of talk about people holding unfair expectations of role-playing games. And to some extent, I have to sympathize. We are in an age where we're inundated with a ton of role-playing game material if you but look for it. You have lots of people live streaming on platforms like Twitch and of course YouTube. You have a variety of professional channels. Even Wizards of the Coast themselves on their D&D Beyond platform make videos that are high-grade animation and professional writers talking about topics that are interesting and germane to role players. So it's easy to look at all of the things that are available, and human nature being what it is, we will sometimes mentally compare our things to what we see and what we absorb. Sometimes that can lead to rather unhealthy comparisons. I know some people who are talking about something called the Matt Mercer effect, where they're struggling to deal with players who expect their game experience is going to be very similar to that which you can find in his game of Critical Role, which is very polished, very lots of effects, lots of tight narrative and things, and I've been told it's pretty good. I've only seen a little bit of Critical Role myself because I don't watch a lot of actual plays, but that's an issue that we've been struggling with. It's interesting too because it's a fairly modern dilemma. Back in the day, gaming was a much more personalized experience. You had a DM who would come up with his own dungeon, and people would come and try out the dungeon with a variety of characters. The old school style of play. And as time went on and people kind of let their interpersonal bubbles mingle and ideas percolated, you had a lot of people comparing and fine-tuning their styles to mesh with what they've seen from other people, things that they like, they took out of each other's games. Now, role-playing games are, of course, based largely upon different media. fantasy media, cyberpunk, sci-fi. If it's not a role-playing game that's directly tied in, like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, Star Trek, it has some inspiration from those movies. And for a lot of people, playing these games is an attempt to live the fantasy of being in that universe, similarly to what you can see on the silver screen or the small screen at home. That's been a part of role-playing for, well, since its inception. A lot of player characters, your fighters are practically Conan XPs for some people. Your wizards can be very Gandalf-like. And the challenge some people have are breaking out of those molds. For some people, they don't want anything to do with your traditional templates of these various characters, and they strive to make new and unique things all the time. But what Ben was talking about was the trap that people can have trying to run games, because this is his GM experience line of videos, is that trying to run games like movies is hard, difficult, probably shouldn't be done. Now, I don't know the kind of experiences that Ben has. He's been somewhat autobiographical in some of his videos. I don't get the sense that he's got, a huge range of role-playing games that he's played under, although he has some of the good benchmarks that you should hit, like Call of Cthulhu and Dungeons and Dragons and so on. But I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I know, for instance, that there is a series of role-playing games that are based directly off of movies. I have one. It's called It Came from the Late, Late, Late Show, and obviously a game like that is going to have hallmarks to movies and elements that simulate movies. Your characters are actors playing in a bad movie, but instead of being handed a script, they're almost ad-libbing through the whole thing. And where they choose to go retroactively becomes where the script would tell them to go. The challenges that they have, the encounters that they have, are those that the script has. If things turn out against the actors, they have a variety of mechanics built into the game that allow them to sidestep them to preserve the movie. But if everything goes wrong, it's just a bad ending for a movie, and you move on to the next. So that one is intentionally made like a movie, and some of the elements are very much preserved from the movie inspirations that come with them. Although the scripts that they have for the adventures are purposefully faithful to the B movie, those god-awful Saturday afternoon movies. So there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor, and some of it is very open humor. Which, it's a great game. It's a fun percentile-based game. I do enjoy it, but it's not something that I would want to do for long campaigns of movie after movie after movie after movie. Maybe someday I'll get the right group that'll persuade me to change my opinion on that. But for now, we're talking about some of the bullet points that Ben talked about, and he made several points in his video. And like these conversation videos do, he elaborated. But I'm just going to hit the bullet points that he thought were important, which he listed in the description kindly enough for me. So I appreciate that, Ben. Thank you very much. His first, the short version of his advice: players are not actors. They don't have scripts ahead of time, so they have to make up their lines on the fly. Interestingly enough, a lot of actors do that too. It's ad-libbing, and some actors have more liberty to do that than others. They have the feel of the character when they're in the moment, and they have the opportunity to ad-lib, and what they decide gets put into the movie sometimes. Again, it depends on how much sway the individual actor has, how draconic the director is. And realistically, that's probably a good time to talk about the differences in different game master styles, too. Because you are going to have some game masters who are very much the Stanley Kubrick style, who want a tightly driven narrative. They want to get certain things out of the players and the actors. Not hopefully to the extent that he did, making somebody do a scene over 100 times before they got exactly the one that he wanted. That would be really tiresome. because the spontaneity of the thing is a large draw for these things. But there is a bridge in that some movies have a lot of ad-libbing and some of them don't have very much at all. Depends on the director. But the fact that the players don't know what's coming up, and in some cases they do. There are some players who are pretty clever, can pick up on tropes, and have a pretty good idea of what's going on before it all hits. I can't tell you how many times I've had players have that happen. But they have to make up their scripts on the fly. Yeah, theoretically, things should be written in a movie as if the players hadn't taken the time to consider, and that the actors had put out the lines that the characters would say at that moment. Now, we know that doesn't happen. A lot of times that dialogue is scripted so that it's at maximum impact for whatever is said. Time is precious in a movie, so you can't waste time with a lot of extra exposition. But in that case, making a movie and a role-playing game is kind of like making a raw edit, where you throw lots and lots of material out that if you were going to make a finished copy, you would cut out a lot and leave it on the editing floor. Also, you have different players who are at different levels. Some players are naturally very dramatic, and they rarely lack for the right thing to say at the right time, which can make that player a joy to have if your game master really appreciates that as a desired effect within the game. But some players don't. Especially if you don't have a regular gaming group or you're doing a pickup game of some sort. Some players are just content to just be there, participating when they have the opportunity. For example, the ones who really like combat and the tactical side of the game, you're not going to get a lot of emoting and a lot of drama out of them. So sometimes you just kind of have to know when they're not comfortable with the spotlight and shift it to somebody who is. Just never forget that that person is there. And that's a challenge for some game masters, certainly. I find, though, that when everything is running right, the spontaneity of those scenes, if the players are really into their characters, can really create magic as far as creating a narrative that you don't have ironclad control over. This bit of advice would definitely be something that be content with the unique, spontaneous experience that you are having with your group. It's not always going to be Oscar-worthy. Mine those nuggets that are truly amazing. And honestly, you can go to any number of websites that have brilliant RPG quotes. RPGNet, I think there's one called Actual D&D Quotes. And they're just some amazing things. I've got, a whole treasure trove of ones from my own experience as well. And I think everybody who's played in any amount of role-playing games gets those moments. And because there's a lot of dross, stuff that just isn't that incredible. Lots of, more dead space and times when the drama just isn't flowing. Those stand out and make it a little bit more memorable and easier to pull back on. So, good advice not to get hung up and expect that everything is going to be Oscar-worthy. Absolutely agree with him there. Not all of them are going to work. Yeah. Again, sometimes you are going to have not so great finishes. Things that would have been cut out on the cutting room floor. That's, again, part of the process, which is perfectly fine. Two, movies are polished many, many times to get them where they are in RPGs. You get one take. This also is true, although there are some games that have exceptions to this. Some games actually let you go back and fix things, and some mechanics like wishes and stuff that allow you, but that's irregardless. Again, my advice that role-playing is a unique experience, that the spontaneity of it is what gives it its importance and its specialness, is a good thing to keep in mind as a game master. You are not, you only have the opportunity to polish one person's input, and that's your own as a game master. You can set up things to make sure that some things are going to have maximum impact. This is a good idea. You obviously want to bring your players into your world as much as possible when that's necessary to do so. Sometimes you want to skim over things. Movies frequently have transition scenes, and your game can be, just the same. Although some people like having everything involved in a character's experience come through on the gaming table, and that's just not my style, but to each their own. One of my personal hallmarks is there's no wrong way to play as long as everyone is having fun. You're still doing the job right. So, yeah, movies are more polished than the final experience. On the other hand, as Ben rightfully said, sometimes it's the failures that bring the impact. They bring the humor when something blows up in somebody's face. Sometimes they bring drama when there's an extra tenseness that happens because of unexpected things that pop up. And also, that sometimes is what makes a moment memorable or makes a particular moment unintentionally hilarious in excess of what you intended, or that's a big part of the thing. And if it was overly polished, you get, a lot of these actual plays where everything is cut and edited and the camera work is just perfect, and to me, that's the least interested way of enjoying a role-playing game. Next, many times you don't want it to be polished. Some don't like that style. Well, I just touched on that, actually. Again, I like raw, and I like to be a participant. I like to, if there's an inside joke, I want it to be an inside joke that I know and I can appreciate. That's my preference, and I'm just going to go with that. Your mileage may vary, and if you enjoy those kind of things, by all means, enjoy them. They do very well for themselves, so certainly more so than my little 100-subscriber channel does. And I'm fine with that. 4, some scenes are fun to watch, but not fun to play. Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of game masters could learn to appreciate more, is that sometimes a quick wave of the narrative brush can get you by a scene that the players just don't want to be in. And I recently got hit with that myself in a game where I was playing in a game. I'm playing a character who I think is cool, and I'm excited to play it. And the game master wanted to go through a lot of investigation and particularly role-playing with NPCs, which got really drawn out after a week of play, and I hadn't met another player character. And the game master didn't understand that I was really interested in getting in with the story. And while it was fun somewhat, I was really itching to get in with the story and the narrative. So understanding that fun is relative and trying to make sure that everybody is having fun is a key part of being a game master, and that is excellent advice. So yes, movies don't have to deal with dice. Throwing random things into the mix, which also add comedy. Yeah, dice. Dice are fun. I've always loved dice ever since I got my very first set. And I can appreciate how amazing successes in the face of almost certain failure, as well as, plenty of unintentional comedy. If somebody rolls the worst case scenario, what's a critical fumble in a lot of games, there's usually going to be something hilarious that happens. I rarely go for the thing that is going to, you hit yourself. You really would have to botch something to actually injure yourself with a blow. Usually you keep the dangerous end towards your opponent, but sometimes things happen, and that can happen. But more often than not, it's a good time to use the opportunity of failure to elevate the moment with some comedy, or adding tension by putting that player in a more compromising position that they'll have to work their way out of, or needing somebody else to come in and back them up to help them out in their difficulty. Dice take away some elements of the control that we have. There are some games that use dice very seldomly or in very controlled ways, and I know there are people who enjoy that kind of style, but movies don't do that as much, and as some people say, God does not play with dice. we're not truly gods in our games as game masters. We have a lot of control, certainly, but the moment you roll dice to determine if anything, well, you're opening up an element of chaos and chance, even if it's very small elements. And, quite honestly, that's what makes it engaging for us as game masters, too. The fact that we aren't purely the ironclad directors who are overseeing behind the camera what's going on in front of us. The players will have luck turn against them when we expect them to succeed easily. I've seen that a number of times. Especially my latest group is just snake bitten at times. And then I'll also have times when I have a player who yeah, do you want to try that? Yeah, you have almost no chance. Critical success. So then you have to kind of bend the fabric of reality to make this thing that probably shouldn't have been allowed. Well, he rolled the best possible chance, so yeah, you can't just say it still doesn't work. You have to work around that. I seem to remember a couple of the Puffin Forest cartoons that were, talking about just that circumstance. So, Temple of the Moon one sticks out in my mind. So yes, dice just make it its own unique element. Even a video game, which can have randomized elements, doesn't have the kind of randomization that we experience as game masters. Depending on how much you allow, random elements to come into your game, of course. So that level of unpredictability at its base level, at the very minimum, requires us to start perfecting our skills at improv and rolling with changes and making the most out of narrating something that we did not intend. It happens all the time, and for some people more often than not. I'm one of those people that the dice continually surprise and amaze me with how this would not happen in a movie, but it's happening here in front of us because I rolled that badly, or they rolled that amazingly. It's just part of gaming, and it is something that makes that experience unique. And it's not just dice, of course. There's other mechanics that you can use. Some games use cards and so on. But anytime there's a randomized element, yeah. Now, that being said, movies have a story. Role-playing games have simulations of things that represent how things would work in this fictional environment that we're creating with our minds. So, to some extent, dice pattern that. Probability and things become a large part of the dice and the experience. So the players are constantly striving, typically, to create characters that are as effective at what they should be good at as possible, so that those dice are more friendly to them because they've increased their chances. They have the best chance of doing what their character is really good at, and therefore, under optimum circumstances for the players, as they roll and succeed more often than they fail at what they should, which is their reward, their payoff for developing their characters a certain way, or picking up certain skills, or having the right pieces of gear. So in that case, the dice often justify what we are intending to do in the story, probably more often than not. And of course, we're probably not also going to talk about the times when you fudge dice, which some game masters do, in which case then the dice have even less of an impact on your story. I'm not going to go into whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. I've talked about it, and Ben has talked about it, and I'm not going to go into that right now. Number 6, just because a scene doesn't work, it isn't the fault of your players. Sometimes you just can't think of the right line off the top of your head. Can't tell you how many times I've played and later on I thought, I should have said that. There is an expression, which I've lost. It's a French expression. It was introduced to me by comedian Tim Minchin. But the idea that you come up with your best ideas after they're timely, and Players are usually under the gun in a game. They are under pressure to perform, to do something and help out their characters, help out the group, help out the story. And some people don't do well under pressure, and things don't come off as well. Because things don't always go perfectly, though, those moments when they do become even more magical and special. Quite honestly, without unintended comedy and drama, because the wrong word, which may generate, an inside meme or humor of some sort, or various things that somebody tries and it just doesn't work. These are how we learn. These are how we grow. This is how we become better gamers. It's how the game adapts and becomes a better game experience. Sometimes it even opens up, holes in our game experience that we can fix. We can house rule. We can tweak. We can look into and explore why it does or does not work in our game. And sometimes it just something falls apart. Quick example that I have: one time we were playing Star Wars, the old West End Games D6 system, and we were flying to take out an Imperial Moff on a planet. And we had the wrong player on the communications. So when we were, the orbital space platform contacted the shuttle we were on saying, "What is your destination? What's your intent?" And he blurted out, "We're here to assassinate the Moff." That didn't go well. It ended up in the shuttle being blown up, our characters dying, and us having to take a shot with other characters. In the context of the game, we were kind of ticked off. You might, understand our characters had survived a couple adventures. We were not just rank newbies. And, I was playing a cool bounty hunter who had all kinds of things, but I was stuck on a ship that got blown up because Corporal Dweeb over there told the comm center that we're there to assassinate the Moff, and we got gunned down by turbo laser fire before we even got close to the planet. So, it's one of those things. But it is a game, and that's an important thing to remember. It's not a movie. A movie would have taken that and go, "Wow, that wasn't the right line, do it over again." And I've played in games where that happens. I've been in that group where somebody did something that stupid and the DM said, "You know what? Nope. Go back in time. You're not doing this anymore. Does somebody else want to take the comm?" And we would have just kept on going. That particular game, I think the game master wanted to make a point, which is why the ship blew up and everybody died. Just that kind of approach to game mastering. But would I have done that? Probably not. I probably would have said, "Okay, cutting room floor, that dies. Let's get somebody in who's actually going to try this one." And the rest of the group probably would go with it, no problem. Simply because, number one, they like their characters. Number two, one person botching it, it's a very sympathetic thing. One person botching it shouldn't ruin it for the entire group. So, yeah, sometimes things don't work. That's the magic of it when it does work, though. And it makes that more special. For all the times that you're going to have where something is tried and it just doesn't click. And that also includes things that we as game masters try too. Sometimes you can lay out a choice situation just waiting for your players to take it, and they will have nothing to do with it. Either because they don't trust it, because they've suddenly developed paranoia, or develop blinders. These things happen. As a game master, it increases our impetus to be flexible and to have multiple hooks and multiple ways of letting the players, find their way, even if sometimes those ways are manufactured to help the narrative along. And then finally, sometimes when a DM is asking for actual emotion, what they actually want is more dramatization. The thing is, when we are game masters and we are looking at the players, we are dealing with individuals who have had their own individual experiences for the day. Somebody may have had a bad day and does not feel like doing anything other than killing orcs. Somebody may have just been through a bad breakup or something, and they just aren't feeling very, in touch with their emotions right now. Everything's kind of all skewed. You just don't know. So a lot of times you can dangle situations out looking for things. And sometimes the players aren't having any of it. I understand as a game master, and you've got a story in mind, and you want to put that out and reveal it for the players and have them take your story and add to it and make it better. Kind of sounds like Hey Jude. But anyhow, and sometimes they just won't. Sometimes they'll just go through the motions. They'll just kind of, trot on forward and shamble a little bit and miss on some of your cues. That can be frustrating as a game master. Sometimes you want something more than just a board game and moving pieces around on the board game. And sometimes the players aren't going to give you that. Sometimes they don't even get past the board game part. And they get, just tied up on insulated things that don't let them go out into your world and cut them off. I've had that happen, certainly. But the thing is, as a game master, it's important to be flexible. It's important to try to work on that spontaneity, try to find multiple avenues to get players to where you want to be. And just sometimes you have to be flexible in your expectations. Understanding that the players aren't always going to be up for the moment. Sometimes they'll just want to have a night to sit in the back and let somebody else take the lead, whether or not that person is ready to or not. The art of consistently providing a great experience for your players involves a certain amount of empathy and luck. Empathy to realize where your players are and what they want out of a night. Luck to have it happen more often than not that they give you what you're looking for. And also, I've always kind of felt that a game master has to be willing to adapt their own expectations, to understand that sometimes if you're a role-play loving game master, you're sometimes going to be stuck with a group that's fixated on tacticals, or you're going to give an entire night over to the big fight without a lot of role-play. And you have to find the joy in that inside. Even if it's not your thing, sometimes the players that you're dealt or the circumstances that you're given, will make you focus on something outside of your wheelhouse. That's not always a bad thing. Again, it's a way of increasing your own skills and flexibility. And that just makes you a better game master in the end, I feel. So I, encourage anybody who feels differently or has anything to add. Comments are below, and I'll gladly I listen and respond to all comments on my channel, which would be a lot harder if I was had the nearly 500,000 people that Puffin Forest has. But I like to think my ability to respond to my viewers will continue on, even if I do manage to get a little bit more success on this channel. As always, love you all. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. If you are a new viewer and feel like subscribing, you like what I do, I encourage you. Subscribe, little notification button. If you are, this is the first time you're seeing me, this is not always this channel. And I encourage you to check out the different sub-channels that are available on my Lair of OmnusI. So, I thank you all very much, and thank you, Ben. It was a great video, and I look forward to watching more of you. I certainly am notified whenever you pop out anything, so thank you again. I'm Rob, here at the Lair of OmnusI. Thank you very much, and I will see you the next time I decide to crawl in front of the internet. Farewell!